We can trust God in any circumstance we encounter with the assurance found in these 3 words: God's got this. We can overcome. We can have victory. We can believe in deliverance. We can believe in healing. We can believe that we can overcome in any situation as long as we know God's got this. Is there anything that I ever go through that God don't know about? The answer is a resounding no. Is there any situation I ever find myself in that God's not aware of? The answer is a resounding no. Is there any sickness that God can't heal me of? The answer is a resounding no. Is there any situation that my marriage or my family or my finances can find ourselves in that God can't fix? And the answer is a resounding no. Is anything too hard for God? No. As believers, as children of God, we know it's going to be okay as long as we keep our eyes fixed on Jesus Christ. Now, if you're looking to the world right now for help, you're depressed. And there is nothing too hard for thee. And there is nothing that's too hard for thee. Is there anything too hard for me? What's the answer to that question that God's asking us? No, nothing too hard for Him. Say it again, God's got this.
We all have things that come against us. It's easy to live uptight, wondering how it's going to work out. What if the medical report isn't good? What if my finances don't get better? What if my child doesn't get accepted in that school? We tried to figure it out. We've done our best, but we don't see anything changing. If we're not careful, we'll live worried, discouraged, not expecting it to get better. But there's a simple phrase you have to keep down in your spirit: God's got this. He's on the throne. He sees what's happening. He already has the solution. You don't have to figure it out. There may not be a logical answer. In the natural, you don't see a way. That's okay. We serve a supernatural God. He has ways to do it we've never thought of. Instead of trying to force it to happen, living uptight, you have to let go and let God. When you turn it over to Him and say, God, I know you've got this. I know you're in control. Not only will you feel the heaviness, the weight lift off of you, but God will make things happen that you couldn't make happen. You have many problems. You have many challenges. You have many questions. You have many struggles. You need to know that you have a mighty God, because when you face mighty problems, you need to know that God, who will help you face them, is up to the task. And He is up to the task right now. For God so loved the world. He has never messed up. He has never struggled. And He is not messing up now. And He is not struggling now. He will help us. He will help us. Really, what we need to do during these seasons is focus less on the muscle of mankind and more on the muscle of God. Reach up, and you'll see that our God has got this.
In Psalm chapter 46 and verse number 1, that psalmist David wrote, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. I've told you this before, but it bears repeating. The only time and place in your entire Bible that God promises to be a present help is when we're in trouble. He said, I'm going to be a very present help. I'm not going to be a casually present help. I'm not going to be a spotty present help. I'm not going to be here and there, here a little, there a little, present help. He said, I'm going to be a very present help in the time of trouble.
God is not just with you on the mountaintops. He's with you in the valleys when you're going through things. He knows what you're up against. The scripture says God is concerned about what concerns you. A sparrow doesn't fall to the ground without God knowing about it. How much more is God concerned about what's happening in your life? Trust Him. Live from a place of peace. This is a decision we have to make on a daily basis. Because every day there's something to worry about. There's some reason to get upset. All through the day, keep this phrase close to your heart. God's got this. He's concerned about me. He's working in my life. He's bigger than my enemies. He's lining up the right people. He's arranging things in my favor. That attitude of faith is what allows God to do amazing things.
Do you know why and how the shepherd boy David was able to prevail over the warrior giant Goliath? Very simple. David didn't compare himself to the giant. He compared the giant to God. We need to quit comparing ourselves to our troubles. Quit comparing ourselves to our pain and our pressure and the things we think we can't do anything about. They're giants in our lives. And instead of trying to figure out what can I do about it, do I have enough money? Do I have enough clout? Do I have enough friends? Is there any way I can solve this? And when you look at it through that eye, you're comparing David to Goliath. But David was smart enough to say, you come to me with sword and spear, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts. And the Bible said David ran right toward him and let the rock go and the giant come down. He compared the giant to his God.
What you're facing may be bigger, stronger, more powerful, but when you refuse to worry, when you refuse to live stressed out, instead you stay in peace, thanking God that He's fighting your battles, knowing that He's in control, you are showing God by your actions that you're trusting Him.
We worry too much. We worry about all sorts of things, don't we? We worry about things we can't even change. We worry until we're a nervous wreck. We worry ourselves into high blood pressure. We worry ourselves into a stroke or a heart attack. We worry ourselves into ulcers. We worry until we become absolutely miserable people. Kind of people nobody wants to be around. We worry when it would be easier to trust God.
Is something weighing you down today? Are you worried about a situation? Frustrated by what didn't work out? Or maybe down on yourself because you're not where you thought you would be? God is saying to you, I've got this. It's not a surprise to me. I have new beginnings. I have healing. I have breakthroughs. I'm asking you to change your perspective. Switch over into faith. That situation at work that you're worried about, God's got it. I'm asking you to quit worrying about what you're facing. Quit losing sleep over that child that's not doing right. Quit being upset because somebody did you wrong. Your dream hasn't come to pass yet. Can I tell you, God's got this.
I like what Corrie ten Boom, the famous Jewish Holocaust survivor, said. She said, worry does not empty tomorrow of its troubles. It empties today of its strength. Your worry don't change tomorrow. Your worry doesn't change next week. Your worry isn't going to change your situation. Your worry isn't going to help you make more money on the job. It's not going to fix your car. It's not going to fix the house. It's not going to keep it from raining tomorrow. All the time you're worrying about whether or not it'll rain tomorrow, you're missing today's sun. Life is too short for you to live your life every day worrying about something that might happen, worrying about what somebody has said or what somebody has done. Life is too short to spend it worrying. Life is too short for you to allow yourself to constantly be all worked up about something. Life is too short to go around miserable. Life is too short for you to make everybody around you miserable. Life is too short to harbor grudges. Life is too short to hate. Quit worrying about stuff that hadn't happened yet. It's a proven fact that 99% of the things we worry about never happen. Quit worrying about what can go wrong and get excited about what can go right. It doesn't take any more effort to believe something bad's going to happen than it does to believe something good is going to happen. No more effort. And by the way, they're really both faith. You can either have faith that something good's going to happen, or you can have faith something bad's going to happen. Either one is you got faith. I choose to have faith God's going to do something good. I said I choose to have faith God's going to do something good. Quit worrying about the future. As children of God, we don't know what the future holds, but we know who holds the future. Quit worrying about the future. Put it in the hands of God. That's where it belongs anyway.
Sometimes we're trying to play God. We're trying to make our boss promote us, make ourselves get well, and make the contract go through. But when you take your hands off and say, God, I know you've got this. I'm not going to worry about my finances. I'm not going to live uptight because of the medical report. I'm not going to be frustrated because I haven't met the right person. God, I trust your timing and I trust your ways. My life is in your hands. God never promised that we wouldn't have difficulties, but He did promise He would give us strength for every battle. He would take what was meant for harm and use to our advantage. You may have a good reason to worry about something. In your health, your finances, a dream. You've done everything you can. Doesn't look like it's going to work out. Stay in faith. God is saying, I've got this. I'm working behind the scenes. I'm in the process of turning it around. It's just a matter of time before you see things change in your favor. Now, live out of a place of peace, a place of trust. It may not happen the way you thought, but God's ways are better than our ways. God knows what's best for you. He's got this.
And if you're in the middle of a storm right now, instead of going home tonight and worry yourself sleepless, go to work tomorrow feeling bad because you worried all night and didn't sleep. You know what you realize in the morning after you've worried all night? Is that the problem's still there. Worrying didn't fix it. So I'm worried about my child. I'm worried about our money. I'm worried about jobs. I'm worried about a car. I'm worried about a place to live. I'm worried about my spouse. I'm worried. You can worry, and you're not going to change no kids, no spouse, no family, no bank balance, because worry isn't how you fix the stuff. The way you get a miracle is lay the worry aside and have faith in God. Don't worry. God's got it all in control. If you could ask God any one question and you knew he would give you an answer right now, what would you ask him? What would you ask? Well, it may not be surprising, but by far, the number one questions that Americans ask is, why does God allow pain and suffering in the world? Does that surprise you? Didn't surprise me. You know, if you've never asked the question, why is there suffering? Why is there pain in the world? The chances are you will when it strikes you full force, or it strikes a loved one full force. And you know what? It's going to come. It's going to come. Jesus was honest. Jesus said, you're going to have suffering. Jesus said this in John 16:33. He said, you will have suffering in this world. You will. But why? All I could do would be to look at you and give you a 4-word answer. I do not know. I don't know. I don't know. I cannot stand in the shoes of God and give a complete answer to that question. I don't have the mind of God. I don't have the eyes of God. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 12 says, now we see things imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in a mirror. But then we will see everything with perfect clarity. All I know now is partial and incomplete. But then I will know everything completely, just as God now knows me completely. So if you ask me, why do individual events of pain and suffering happen? Friends, honestly, in this world, you may not get a full answer. And frankly, if you're going through something like that today, if you're going through an era of your life with a lot of suffering and a lot of pain, then the last thing you really need is some theological treatise on pain and suffering. Because no amount of words are going to be sufficient for you. It's always going to sound trite when you're in the middle of suffering. What you need is the very real presence of Jesus Christ in your life. But having said that, this is equally important. Even though we can't understand everything about why we suffer, there are some things that we can know. Even though suffering is not good, God can use it to accomplish good. Now, you might hear that and you say, well, no, wait a second. Hold on. Let's not skim over that. I've gone through some horrific suffering in my life. I've gone through some awful pain in my life. And honestly, I don't think that God, even God, can find any good to emerge from the suffering that I've gone through. Friends, if that's the way you feel today, let me just remind you of one thing. And that is that God is so powerful and so good that he was able to take the worst possible thing that could ever happen in the history of the universe, which is deicide, the death of the Son of the God on a cross. He was able to take the worst thing that could ever happen and turn it into the best thing that has ever happened, which is the opening of heaven to all who follow him. And so you have to say to yourself, if God can take the worst possible thing that could ever occur and turn it into the best possible thing that could ever occur, could he not take my pain and my suffering and cause good to emerge? And the answer is, of course he can. Yes, he can, and he will. He will. He would use your suffering perhaps to draw you into a deeper and more intimate relationship with him. He may cause your suffering to point other people to salvation through Christ. He may use it to mold and to shape your character in ways that never could have been shaped had you not gone through that experience. There are a myriad number of ways that God can and he will cause good to emerge from your suffering if you are committed to following him. We decide whether we're going to turn bitter or turn to God for peace and courage. We make that decision. When tough times come, we going to turn bitter, or are we going to turn to God and receive peace and courage? We've all seen examples in our lives of how the same kind of suffering has a completely different effect on two different people. Some people become angry and bitter and turn inward because of the suffering they've gone through. And yet somebody else can go through the same kind of suffering and they come closer to God and closer to people and more loving and more tender. In other words, someone can lose a child to a drunk driver and turn inward with rage and bitterness for the rest of their life. But someone else has a child lost to a drunk driver and they go out and they start Mothers Against Drunk Driving. One philosopher said this to me. He said, Lee, I believe all suffering is at least potential good, an opportunity for good. He said, it's up to our free choice to actualize that potential. He said, not all of us benefit from suffering and learn from it because it's up to us. It's up to our free will. So we make the choice. Are we going to run away from God or are we going to run to God? So let me finish that quote that I started this message with, because I only quoted part of this verse, John 16:33. I want to put it into context now. The entire verse says this: I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. You will have suffering in this world, but be courageous. I have conquered the world. In other words, he offers us in the midst of our suffering the two very things we need the most. He offers us peace for the present and courage for the future. How? Because he's conquered the world. Because through his own suffering and through his death, he has deprived the world of having ultimate power over you. Suffering does not have the last word anymore. Pain does not have the last word anymore. God has the last word. Jesus is the last word. You see, God's ultimate answer to suffering is not just an explanation, it is the incarnation. Suffering is a personal problem. Therefore, God sent a personal solution in Jesus Christ. God is not some distant and disinterested deity. He, through Jesus Christ, entered into our pain, entered into our suffering. And Psalm 34, verse 18 says this: the Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. This wise philosopher that I got to sit down with said this to me at a time in my life when I was going through some tough times. He said, Jesus is there in the lowest places of our lives. He said, are you broken? Jesus was broken like bread for you. Are you despised? Jesus was despised and rejected of men. You cry out that you can't take it anymore? Jesus was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Did someone betray you? Jesus was sold out for 30 pieces of silver. Are your tenderest relationships broken? Jesus loved and he was rejected. Do people turn from you? Well, guess what? They hid their faces from him like he was a leper. Does he descend into your deepest hells? Yes, he does. In fact, from a Nazi concentration camp, Corrie ten Boom wrote these words: no matter how deep our darkness, he is deeper still. He is deeper still. Every tear we shed becomes his tear. And then the wise man said this to me. He said, it's not like God just sympathizes with you like a close friend would. Any close friend, if you're going through pain and suffering, any close friend of yours is going to sit on the couch next to you and is going to put their arms around you and is going to empathize and sympathize with you. That's true of any friend. But he said, if Jesus is in you, if you are his child, he is inside of you. And if he is inside of you, he is closer to you even than your closest friend. And therefore, your sufferings become his sufferings, and your sorrow becomes his sorrow. And so, friends, when tragedy strikes, and it will, or when pain comes into your life, and you know it will, then you have a choice to make. Do I turn away from God and turn bitter? Or do I turn to God and find hope and peace and courage? Peace for the present, courage for the future.